Let's find out what life in Dillon would be like for Edna. A 5 foot wide boardwalk ran the length of the house front. I opened the door right into the front room and reached automatically for the switch. Thank God it has electricity. A cord with a single light bulb hung from the ceiling. A big window faced right on the street. When I opened the door, I found that 2 steps beyond the boardwalk would put me right on the middle of Main Street, US Highway 6. The front room was long and narrow. Beyond it was the kitchen, and then a bedroom big enough for twin beds, a dresser, and Rolf's little bed. From the kitchen, there was a door opening to a long, dark shed used for wood and coal storage. Beyond the coal shed was the privy, a two-holer. Later, I was to find out this was a communal convenience that I'd have to share with the guests of the Heart of the Rockies cabin camp next door. Fortunately, it had a good, strong inside bolt. After returning to Idaho Springs, I fell into bed exhausted, but before I could fall asleep, I thought, just a few days ago, I told myself that no one would ever catch me driving these passes, and here I've driven over 2 of them and twice in one day. I'd set my alarm for 5 a.m. so that we would be off in plenty of time to arrive at the main street of Dillon to guide the truck with our furniture to the house. I reached Dillon at 7 a.m. thinking I would have to wait. But no, to the side of the house was piled the crating from the furniture. Inside were Mr. Cole and Jake Josh, the forest ranger, hooking up my refrigerator. Everything was in place. Even the beds in Rolf's crib were set up in the bedroom. I'll bring your skis when they get to Kremling, Mr. Cole assured me. How did you ever get in? I asked. Oh, Mr. Riley was here and opened up, and he told most folks in town you'd need help. From the grocery store directly across the street came a plump, jolly woman. This here is Irma Feaster. Mr. Cole introduced us. She runs the grocery store. Irma took Rolf from my arms, settled herself in a comfortable chair, and told me, you've no need to worry about paying the groceries for a month. I laughed happily. Thanks, Irma. I don't think I'll be lonely here. That's what I was afraid of most. That night I wrote to Max to tell him all that had happened in just 2 days. I'll drive out to the ranch, I wrote, and see what I can do to clean up around there. Maybe I can get the irrigation ditch going. And to my mother in Minnesota, I wrote, I really wish you were here. I know you'd like this crazy old town with such friendly people. It's a far cry from Minnesota, not to mention Penn State. You would believe you were back in Norway in the mountains you miss so much. The next morning at the post office, I was delighted to find a letter from Max, forwarded from the Idaho Springs Forest Service. It had taken him almost a day to get up to Mount Evans, following the big rotary snowplow. Max wrote about getting settled for the summer, contacting visitors, fire detection, hauling lumber, and living with some interesting research scientists. Max's last paragraph made me wish that Rolf and I could join him. I've seen bighorn sheep several times, a ram with 5 ewes, less than 100 feet away, and for 15 minutes at a time. Today from the peak, I heard several bull elk whistling. I've seen marmots and conies in the rocks. They're fun to watch. At night, Denver lies below us like a giant glittering tiara. Miss you, love, Max. Early one morning, just about a week after I'd moved to Dillon, I was awakened by the sound of gunshots. They sounded quite close, so I rushed to the front window. There, across the street on the boardwalk in front of the Mint Saloon, sat two cowboys aiming their rifles right at my house. I jumped back, terrified, and tore into the bedroom. I'd better get dressed in case I should need to uh, run out the back way through the sagebrush. But the shots had stopped. Peeking out the window again, I saw the door of the Mint swing shut behind the two men. The grocery door was open, so I rushed across the street and breathlessly burst in on Irma. Irma, I panted, did you hear those shots? Those cowboys were shooting at my house. To my amazement, Irma started laughing. Honey, she was almost choking with laughter. They weren't shooting at your house. Most every Sunday morning they try to ring the church bell. See? Right over the top of your house. I looked, and sure enough, there was the church bell tower in plain view beyond my house across the sagebrush field. I had also noticed that the two-room schoolhouse was near the church. Now I walked around behind the house and looked at it. Oh no, I thought. My children will grow up and go to that? 2 rooms for 8 grades? For the first time, I felt apprehensive about the future. Without sensing the first bit of snobbery in myself, I thought there must be a bigger and surely much better school somewhere near here. A couple of days later, when I was fixing lunch, the door opened and there stood Besmore, my little Norwegian mother. How did you get here? I asked with great relief, bursting into tears. I suddenly realized I wouldn't be alone anymore. Besmore said, Max wrote to me and invited me to come. He told me, when you get off the bus, just ask anyone in Dillon and they'll tell you where Edna and Rolf are. And what's all that lumber on the side of your house, Edna? It looks bad thrown out there. And when do I see Rolf? Early the next morning, I heard strange sounds outside the bedroom window. I'd forgotten my mother's habit was getting up at 5 a.m. I looked out the window, and there was Besmore in a big floppy sun hat, sitting on a log stump that she'd found in the coal shed. She had located the tire jack in the Ford and was vigorously pulling the nails out of the crating and stacking the lumber neatly. A couple of days later, when I found it all gone, she informed me that she had sold it to Mr. Riley, only she called him Old Man Riley in her Norwegian accent. Then she handed me a receipt for 2 months' rent. It was a good trade, she said with satisfaction. With the 87th Infantry stationed at Camp Hale just beyond Leadville, the bars in Dillon were doing a bang-up business. The ski troopers crowded in every evening, and the honky-tonk pianos vied with the ring of the slot machines. I was soon to learn the meaning of camp followers and red light district, and rolling the soldiers. Getting off the bus one afternoon were two good-looking girls dressed quite elaborately for Dillon, I thought. They were carrying heavy suitcases as they picked their way in their high-heeled shoes across the dusty Main Street and into the heart of the Rockies next door. One with heavy brown curls cascading to her shoulders was wearing a fur jacket, though the temperature was 80 degrees. I assumed they must be on a misguided travel agency holiday. Irma's grocery store was the best place to find out what was going on in town. The outside national and world news stayed outside. I often wondered if we were still at war. No one talked of anything except the Saturday night dance or why some drunk decided to try to kill himself by driving 90 miles an hour up and down Main Street until he ran out of gas. And then rather than fill up the car, he'd fill himself up again at one of the bars. And there everyone knew the sheriff would grab him. Soon I heard by taking my time in the grocery store the two new girls in town were waitressing at the Blue River Saloon. None of this much interested me, except since my bedroom window faced on the back of the heart of the Rocky Cabins, I was kept awake or awakened late at night by loud laughter and a wind up phonograph playing cowboy laments. One refrain I remember best as it was played over and over. Why don't you haul off and love me like you used to do? With a heavy emphasis on haul off. Really realizing by then what camp followers meant, I just wish they'd found lodging somewhere else and far away. For several weeks and during the day, I had noticed a little girl about 10 years old standing in front of the grocery store. She had long blonde hair and would have been quite pretty if she hadn't been so terribly thin. I asked Irma who the child was. She told me she was the daughter of a woman who lived about a half mile out of town in an old cabin. The mother was crippled from polio and sent the child in for groceries. The father, Irma had heard, worked in South Dakota during the threshing season and got back before winter set in. You'll notice, said Irma, how she follows those two gals around, the one staying over at the cabins next to your place. I didn't think much more about it since I'd gotten a bike and could take off and go to the ranch or visit my new friends at the forest ranger station. Some days I would bicycle for miles admiring the fields of wildflowers in the valley. Having Bessmore there with Rolf gave me so much more freedom. One morning I was giving Rolf his bath in front of the kitchen window, which faced the cabins, and I saw a green sedan pull up in front of them. There were two men in the front seat. Glancing at the license plate, I noticed it was from Illinois. Soon one of the young girl waitresses came running out and got in the back seat, slamming the door. I thought they'd take off, but they sat there for quite a while with the motor idling. Then the second girl came out, holding the hand of the little blonde child I'd seen hanging around town. The little girl was dressed in a bright red dress, far too big for her, but pulled up by some kind of belt. She kept tripping over the too long dress and stumbled along in the much too big high-heeled slippers that she was wearing. She would have fallen if the girl holding her hand hadn't supported her. Since she was laughing delightedly, I thought, oh, poor kid. They're letting her play dress up and probably taking her along on a picnic. Next time, we'll find out what happened to the little girl in the red dress.